We've all said dark and depressing things at different moments in our lives, but imagine being considered the human being responsible for originating one of the darkest and depressing quotes in human existence. That man would be J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is known for his infamous line, "Now I've become death, the destroyer of worlds." I want to play through that clip later on in this video and discuss why his chilling delivery is so impactful and significant. But I also want to bring to your attention in just a few moments 2 clips from Oppenheimer from rare interviews that illustrate just how brilliant this man was in his thoughts, in his sentence composition, and in the nuanced ideas that he would bring to conversations.
Now, do you think that our country's use of the bomb was necessary?
I believe that the view which I learned from many, but above all from General Marshall and from Colonel Stimson, the Secretary of War, the view that they had, that we would have to fight our way to the main islands, and that it would involve a slaughter of Americans and Japanese on a massive scale, was arrived at by them in good faith, with regret, and on the best evidence that they then had. To that alternative, I think the bomb was an enormous relief.
When I watch this, I notice that there's a thoughtfulness and an honesty that's palpable and discernible in his answers and in his eyes. What I find fascinating about the way Oppenheimer communicates is that there is incredible nuance laced into his answers. He doesn't state something in the most blunt and obvious way. He will add a condition, a caveat to a point that he's making. For example, when he was talking about the generals and their decision, he said it's not just a decision that they made, it was a decision in good faith. He's double-clicking, zooming into the answer, providing additional context, all within the structure of one sentence. What we just watched, I believe, was one sentence. I want to play through another interview that shows another brilliant side of him and shows how chipper, energetic, and erratic he can be in the right scenario.
In this era that is more threatened and dominated than any previous one by scientists, their decisions, their discoveries, what about the poor, uninformed civilian?
It isn't the layman that's ignorant. It's everybody that's ignorant. The scientist may know a little patch of something. And if he's a humane and intelligent and curious guy, he'll know a few spots from other people's work. He may even be able to read a book. But his condition is the condition of everyone, which is that almost everything that's known to man, he doesn't know anything about at all, or knows it only in a very sketchy way. And that's because it's gotten a bit complicated. The problem of a coherent civilization is the problem of living with ignorance and not being frustrated by it. So that you find occasionally a man knows 2 things. And that intersection may be a great event in the history of ideas. Occasionally, a man may think that something is relevant or exciting which no one before thought concerned him professionally. That may change the history of the world. And these are the connections, these virtual connections, these casual and occasional connections, which make the only kind of coherence we have. That and affection, that and respect, that and I suppose a kind of humanity.
Notice when he speaks that there is a playfulness with his words, specifically with the tonality. He puts emphasis on certain things, and he does use his body, the nonverbals, to communicate, add additional weight. I keep defaulting to that word, but I do feel it describes what he's showcasing. It does do it justice. He does lean in several times during the interview where the interviewer will ask him a question and he will lean in to showcase his interest, and he will pause, he will ponder the thought before he answers. We saw this in the previous clip. I don't think I noted it then, but he is very careful in stitching his sentences together. He is not one to default to a pause or an or a just to fill the air with noise.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
A few things I want to note on here. So one, this quote, as Oppenheimer did stipulate in this interview, and this is an interview, this is actually recorded almost 15 years after the detonation of the atomic bomb, which would bring up an interesting point. He has this onerous, dreadful, almost ghostly encounter about him when he's delivering this line. I would be very curious to know how he actually said this when he was more youthful and chipper, 15, almost 20 years prior when the bomb was detonated. This quote, yes, does come from the Bhagavad Gita, and the story behind it is Vishnu, who's one of the Hindu gods, was instructing Prince Arjuna, I believe his name was, who was preparing for battle, and he had to confront an army that was made up of his friends and relatives, which put him in this bind, morally, this conflict of interest. And he is given this philosophy by Vishnu that aims at helping Prince Arjuna separate his role of a warrior from his personal feelings and worries. This is one of the main lessons taught in the Bhagavad Gita. It's known as Dharma, which I believe translates to something like holy duty. It's understandable, given this scenario, how Oppenheimer would have felt something very similar about the nature of his relationship with the creation of this bomb to it being this weapon that could potentially destroy humanity. What's remarkable about all of this is the understanding of the events that surround a quote give an unprecedented weight to the words that almost cannot be quantitated. It can't be measured. We understand that this is an event that is one of the scars of humanity, and that scar tissue is something that we have I don't want to say a deep reverence, but there is this, maybe reverence is the right word. I don't know. It's the same flavor and quality of memory that we associate with most events in the past that are traumatic or tragic in some way, at least that profoundly affect a large scale of humanity. We recognize that there's something very deep and surreal about these words, that they're not said in a frivolous or recreational way, but they're carefully considered